Good morning. There you are. Welcome to Backchannel. It's Monday morning, the 28th of February, 2022. I'm Anthony Davis, and we have a whole show for you here. So hang out with us for the next couple of hours as we spend some time together getting to know each other and also learning a little bit about what's happening right across the United States. Subjects today: Europe is at war, and yet US conservatives are showing little interest in Ukraine. We'll find out why. Also the environment. Many of the impacts of global warming are now simply irreversible, according to the UN's latest assessment. And chefs are turning to TikTok to reinvent themselves. We'll look at the culinary trend. BHM, Black History Month, continues. Just for today, though, as George Ann Robinson was one of the first Black American women to be appointed as a police officer in the United States. We'll take a look at her story together in just a little while. If you want to get in touch, then do the usual stuff. You just have to go to, if you have an Echo show, wake it up, say, and then your message. If you have a computer, you can log in. Well, you don't even have to log in. You just type in the words backchannel.tv, and that will effectively be the web chat facility for you to message me at any time. And there's also YouTube, where you can follow the show online. That way, comment and see the live stream. Okay, let's jump straight to the morning papers this morning, because that's kind of how we do it. You take a little look at what's happening, where you are, so to speak. Fresno is where we're heading first. In California, Putin puts nuke forces on alert. Ukraine agrees to talks, it says, in a dramatic escalation of East-West tensions over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. President Vladimir Putin ordered Russian nuclear forces put on high alert Sunday in response to what he called aggressive statements by leading NATO powers. Do you know, when he made this announcement, it was done in like a little speech. He was sitting at a desk with his generals. His generals did not look happy about this. Their faces were a picture. They were a picture. Looking at these two guys sitting there with all their kind of decorations on their lapels, and they were looking at him as if to say, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I wonder if one of those the generals is the type of person who might be like, this could be an opportunity to put a bullet in the president. I was just thinking, what are the chances of that, Because this guy has, ruled with an iron fist for so long. And so, he's not popular in his own country, as we know. People have kind of woken up to his propaganda and all of that kind of stuff. So, do you think there could ever be a revolt in Russia? Do you think that could happen? It should take him down? I don't know. It's very interesting. Anyway, the directive to put Russia's nuclear weapons in an increased state of readiness for launch raised fears that the crisis could boil over into nuclear warfare. Putin's step is potentially putting in play forces that, if there's a miscalculation, could make things much, much worse, much more dangerous. So this is kind of where it's at now. And, you have to understand, like, nuclear warfare doesn't mean like some kind of, atomic bomb that just mushroom clouds the whole of Ukraine necessarily, but there are smaller tactical nuclear weapons that can devastate cities and towns, and that's really the worry here. I don't think world nuclear war is necessarily the thing right now. This is starting off too small. This is just Putin and just Ukraine right now, although Belarus seem to be wanting to get involved all of a sudden as well. Not entirely sure whose side they're on. They just want to prevent themselves from being occupied by Putin, so they're just, pretending to be on his side temporarily. Just a hunch. Count of the homeless returns with COVID modifications. Roughly 200 volunteers, part of a coalition service, and community organizations that focus on homelessness, gathered on Friday morning for the final day of the 2022 point-in-time count, a tally of the homeless population in Fresno and Madera. The actual count, organized by the Fresno-Madera Continuum of Care, takes a designated day across the state. This year, the statewide count took place on the evening of February 23rd. This is where they basically count how many people are homeless, and goes on in cities and countries all over the world, And it's kind of devastating, to kind of really get these numbers and to realize. In London, where I'm from, the numbers vary wildly. But when I was living there, it was like 2,500 people, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's like a whole, village, effectively, of people who are homeless in the city. Fresno County supervisors say no to climate health study. It's just like ignore the problem and then it goes away. That's their theory. It says in a unanimous vote, the Fresno County Board of Supervisors rejected a project that would have helped public health officials understand the impact of climate change on vulnerable rural communities in Fresno County. The vote during Tuesday's meeting in effect rejected a proposal to execute a $175,000 state grant, which would have assessed how climate change impacts the health of the country's vulnerable populations, particularly in the rural areas. This is a very right-wing county, isn't it, Fresno? A very conservative county in California. And it's the same attitude as Ron DeSantis, referring to climate change as being, that's Democrat stuff, is what he said, That's what he said. This is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who live in a parallel universe. Their attitude is, if we ignore it, it goes away. That's just how it is, and there's nothing we can really do about that. Stacey, good morning. Great to hear you. Great to see you. Thank you very much for joining in. So there we go. That's the Fresno Bee this morning. Let's jump on to something else. Los Angeles Times. Seeing as I'm in Los Angeles, staying in California, Ukraine agrees to talk with Russia. It says with siege, Putin fears of a stronger Europe turn into reality. Russian President Vladimir Putin's brazen and unprovoked assault on Ukraine is fast turning his fears of a more resolute Europe and potentially expanded NATO alliance into a self-fulfilling prophecy. NATO has come together behind stiff economic sanctions against Moscow. Finland and Sweden, after decades of neutrality, have signaled a new interest in joining the alliance, while more autocratic members of the Defense Pact have excoriated Moscow. And in an effort to shore up Ukraine's defenses, the European Union, for the first time, will finance the purchase and delivery of weapons, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said on Sunday. She's fierce, Ursula von der Leyen. I don't know if you're aware of this person, but she is fierce. I love her. In short, Europe's leading powers have shifted into a position of heightened defensiveness towards Russia. They say we now have to realize that we are faced with a new normal for our security, said NATO General Secretary. Noting that the beefed-up NATO troop presence in its eastern countries and weapons deliveries to Ukraine, this is just beginning of the adaptation that we need to do as a response to a much more aggressive Russia. So, it's fascinating to me. This is kind of where it's at now. And this is what we are, this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an omnipresent force around the world that is basically going to ramp up the pressure on Russia. So let me know if you are somebody who is, thoughtful of this, because I was saying to producer Carla earlier that I just personally feel very helpless about this whole thing, very helpless. And it makes me very sad because I really want to do something or be part of this in some way. And other than talking about it, reporting on it, having a social conscience about it, it's difficult from this distance, isn't it? You can donate, I guess. Moscow puts nuclear forces on alert, troops advancing, also on the front of the Los Angeles Times this morning. And a place to get high and not overdose. Christina Peterson anxiously tapped the heels of her boots on the tile floor inside the brightly lit lobby. Moments earlier, she had given her date of birth to an intake coordinator and answered an inquiry about the drug she planned to use. Heroin, she said, referring to the tiny glassine envelope stamped off-white tucked inside her black purse. For much of the decade, Peterson has been hooked on heroin, her addiction becoming increasingly severe and public. Occasionally, she's shot up in quiet corners of subway stations as she's waited for the E-train back to her apartment where she lives in Queens. She sought to battle her addiction by taking methadone. but soon relapsed and was rushed to an emergency room after she overdosed in a park a few blocks from an elementary school. Very sad. This is, the ongoing story. A place to get high and to not overdose. A story out of New York there. Zelensky is winning the PR battle. His social media savvy, contrasted with Putin's stern Cold War manner, has given Ukraine a fighting chance. Yes, as Russian bombs fell across Ukraine, the contrast between the leaders of the warring nations could not be starker. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Sunday sat stern-faced in his tie pulled tight at a long table with his defense officials. Off to the side, he appeared a solitary figure as he raged against the aggressive actions of the West and summoned Russia's nuclear forces to be put on high alert. So yeah, there it is. It says, in Ukraine, a T-shirt-clad President Volodymyr Zelensky, who's 44, was on the streets of Kiev posting yet another defiant video to social media. I am here, he said on the cell phone recording. We will not lay down any weapons. We will defend our state because our weapons are our truth. It was two different styles, two different generations, and two different visions of Europe. The war for Ukraine may be far from decided, but the public relations battle, Zelensky is clearly winning. A lawyer turned comic who wielded the power of social media to leap from playing Ukraine's president on a popular television series to actually being elected president in 2019, Zelensky speaks to a modern Europe seeking to move beyond the nationalist tendencies that ignited two world wars. Putin, who laments the collapse of the Soviet Union as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the last century and a genuine tragedy for his people, he glowers, threatens and brandishes his army. A former KGB agent, he embodies the continent's Cold War past, intent on resurrecting a world order that began to crumble back when Nintendo Game Boy was the rage and Zelensky was only 11 years old. It's very interesting, isn't it? These two very different leaders in opposition. Zelensky, I think, is probably the bravest man in the world right now. The way he has chosen to kind of just walk around the town in the early evening and film himself and make these videos and post them and not leave the city, despite the fact that the Americans have said, why don't we, we can help, we can take you out of here, we can give you safe passage. He's like, no, I'm staying with my family here in Kiev. It's very commendable. And I guarantee that whatever happens at the end of this, Zelensky, either in life or in death, because, there's a good chance he could lose his life, will become one of the great heroes of the 21st century. I think Zelensky has this popularity that is not born of populism, but is born of a kind of genuine kindness and bravery and strength. And this is what I love about politics. When Zelensky first showed up, it was almost like he was a bit of a comedy character because nobody really knew what he was capable of because the guy was a comedian. And yet, it turns out comedy is a very serious business. And that Zelensky actually has really shown up a lot of the leaders of varying nations. Really has the skills. Very impressive. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about this and talk a little bit more about Zelensky, in a little while. I'm just kind of following the live stream here because if you want to kind of be in touch, if you want to become part of this show, then you can just follow the live stream on Twitter. I was just looking for the link and copying it, and you can follow there. And if you haven't got an Echo show, that's the place to go. Otherwise, welcome to Junior and Alan and Patricia and Jack. It's Jack's first time. Welcome, Jack. You are very welcome to spend the next 2 hours with us and contribute and be part of this show at any time, So just give us a shout. Okay, let's move on with these newspapers. No more s'mores cookie deficit boxes out Girl Scouts. Some flavors have been the best by supply chain interruptions. Oh, I see. I mean, I'm just learning about the whole Girl Scout cookie thing. I'll be honest, I didn't really understand what it was, but it turns out it's a whole thing, The Girl Scout cookie. They sell them here on street corners. They go knocking on doors, selling these cookies. And I thought they baked the cookies, but it turns out they just buy them. They're called Girl Scout cookies. And I just thought they were cookies sold by Girl Scouts. Okay, that's the LA Times this morning. Let's move on. Let's go to the... What? I've never had a Girl Scout cookie person knock on my door. No. I wouldn't open the door. I'm pretty scared of Girl Scouts, to be honest. I'm pretty scared. Somebody recently gave me a box of Girl Scout cookies, which I'm yet to open, and I'm very grateful for those. I hadn't had a look. Jack says hi. Hello, Jack. Thank you for joining us. Great to know that you're part of the Backchannel movement now. Jack's in Texas, and we've got Alan as well. Hi, Alan. Thank you for joining us. Patricia. I don't say where Patricia's from, but wherever you're from, you're all completely welcome. What a joy to hang out with you guys this morning. Okay, let me move on if I can. We're going to go to the Record Searchlight next. They lead this morning with returning to fight. Some Ukrainians are coming back home to help fight the Russian invasion. As Ukraine tries to fight back against Russia's attacks on the country, some men and women are returning to help. Poland's border guard said on Sunday that some 22,000 people have crossed into Ukraine since Thursday when Russia invaded the country. Despite some people returning, more than 200,000 have been forced to flee the country to bordering nations like Romania, Poland, Hungary, Moldova, and the Czech Republic. The UN Refugee Agency said that the Russian attacks will have a devastating humanitarian consequences on civilians. I mean, that's the thing, we're going to end up with a refugee crisis. And, if they decimate Ukraine, it's going to be one of those countries that people will struggle to return to because they'll have no homes. I mean, there was a glimmer of hope today because there is talks now of talks. And apparently Russia is open to not hitting civilian targets, which is crazy considering that they said at the beginning that they were only going to hit military targets, and then they obviously were hitting civilians as well. And some of the videos that I saw of the behavior of some of the Russian military. But then you've also got some Russian military who were told they were going on training exercises and didn't even realize that there was going to be a war. And are now thinking, I don't want to fight, and refusing to cross the border. But then in contrast to that, you had a 3-mile-long convoy of Russian trucks heading into Kiev yesterday. 3 miles long of Russian trucks carrying equipment and weaponry and armory and troops. And that convoy was terrifying to see. That was like a full-on occupation. So there's a lot of contradiction, There's going to be some talks on the Belarusian border. But at the same time, there's more troops arriving. So it's like, which is it? I guess you can't pause a war whilst there are talks going on, And in the meantime, the number I read last night for casualties was around nearly 400 people dead, including 16 children. That's what I read last night. It's like, really? This is what we're doing now? These days, in 2022, this is where we're at. Okay, what's ahead for Biden's Supreme Court nominee is the headline. It says President Joe Biden's nomination of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court has launched what Democrats hope will be a quick, bipartisan confirmation process for the court's first black woman. Jackson would replace Stephen Breyer, who has said he's going to retire this summer at the end of the court's current session. But Democrats want to confirm Jackson months or weeks before that, ensuring she is the justice in waiting in the case of the 50-50, in case the 50-50 balance of the Senate shifts in any way. Yeah, that's probably a good idea, isn't it? Sorry, I'm just taking my sweater off because it suddenly got very warm in here. I don't know what happened, but something happened. Hang on. I'm wired up and a bit caught up. There we go. That's better. That feels much better. It's nice just to be, a little bit less dressed today. It's starting to heat up, you see. It's 66 degrees outside. And, and it's like 9 o'clock in the morning, so it's obviously going to be a good day. Whereas sometimes you look at the temperature and it's like 48 degrees, and you're like, today's not going to be a hot day. But at this time of the morning, if it's at 66, that means today it's going to be 75 or something like that. My plants are going to love it. I've got a whole stack of new plants outside. And I've been trying to find plants that don't die in the heat, and that's not been easy. Plants do not like direct sunlight, it turns out. Nor do I, as it happens. This is very interesting about Ketanji Brown Jackson because, people keep saying it's going to be an easy nomination. I genuinely don't think it is, or easy confirmation. I genuinely think this is going to take a while, I think that I don't know that they'll get the vote straight away. I don't know that Republicans are going to be open to this. It says Jackson's confirmation will likely take a long time, as Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Dick Durbin said on Friday. The panel will start the process immediately. Democrats say they want to bring down the temperature and confirm Jackson with votes from both Republicans and Democrats. Why do they keep doing this? Why do the Democrats keep pushing for bipartisan involvement? Why not just... do they not realize who they're dealing with? There's this obsession with going back to this old school bipartisanship. And I think it's because Joe Biden is just institutionalized. The guy's been a senator much of his adult life and now the president. And the guy is just... thinks that things can be done like they were in 2002, and it just isn't the case. It's 20 years later now. And the Republicans have gone off in this far-right extremist direction where they're posting memes of murdering AOC and, taking Putin's side in the war on Ukraine. Why does he want to be bipartisan with them? Is he crazy? This obsession with the past, I just don't get it. Just do whatever you can to get everything you need through, at whatever lengths it'll take. Don't worry about that lot. I don't even know if the Republican Party is going to survive. I think it might split. Adam Kinzinger's certainly trying to kind of create a new grouping. He's on the January 6th investigative committee, and he's said he's not going to run again as a conservative, and instead he's looking to kind of start a new organization, which is effectively Republicans against Trump. It's interesting. And even the GOP leader, Mitch McConnell, doesn't seem to be that interested in Donald Trump anymore. He kind of is saying a lot of things now, which is starting to distance himself from the former president. Former president, of course, doubling down on his desire to support Russia. Insane. Tribal leaders sentenced to prison for embezzlement. This is 3 former leaders of a North State American Indian tribe have been sentenced to prison for stealing millions of dollars from their tribe. The 3 leaders used the money they stole to live a lavish lifestyle that included buying homes, purchasing vehicles, and taking luxury vacations, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Sacramento. Next up, the search is on for California boy stolen in a car when it was stolen. A 2-year-old boy. Oh, no. This is crazy. Police said the 2008 Buick Enclave was taken while Jacob Jardine's mother was unloading groceries at about 4 a.m. in the city of Sunnydale. Why was the kid in the car at 4 a.m.? It says there was no immediate indication whether the thief or thieves knew the child was in the car when it was stolen. Investigations did not say if they had suspects or released any descriptions. Jacob has red curly hair and brown eyes, was wearing a white hooded sweatshirt. Yeah, but why was he in the car at 4 a.m.? I mean, you know, I've had 2 children who are 2 years of age, and I can't think of a single time when you might want to put them in the car at 4 a.m. And if she's unloading groceries, then she's been shopping. So what, does she work nights and she's making her child live an upside-down life? What's the deal here? I'm not blaming the mother for the kidnapping. I'm just asking the question. Why is the child in the car at 4 a.m.? And why would you leave the vehicle unattended even if you're unloading groceries? Surely if you're at home, put the kid in the house first. It's so weird. Anyway, I'm sure we'll find out more about this. Did the child even exist? I mean, I'm sure he did. Apparently the car has a baby on board sticker. I don't know. It's just without enough information, it's hard to speculate, and I'm not naturally a speculator. Okay, let's go to the Bradenton Herald next, as we move to Florida. Ukrainians in Bradenton area prepare for influx of refugees. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is being felt intensely by an estimated 6,000 Ukrainians living in southwest Florida, including the Bradenton-Sarasota area. What has been a trickle of refugees from Ukraine since 2013 because of war and religious persecution could increase in the near future, said Sylvia Akavido, Senior Director of Refugee and Employment Services for Gulf Coast Jewish Community Services. So people don't realize how many Ukrainians are already here in the United States and how many Ukrainian communities there are in certain parts of the United States and around the wider world, you know. It's a big country, a lot of people. Putin puts nuke forces on alert. Ukraine agrees to talks is the headline. Same story, different paper. Linda's joined us. Hello, Linda. Welcome to the show. Great to see you. Linda's in Indiana. And Z has joined us as well, who's listening. Z, welcome to Backchannel. And Junior and Alan, Stacy, Patricia, thank you. Spend your time with us. It's the least we can do, you know, share a little bit of time together. CPAC theme is clear. The GOP is ready to fight over cultural values. That's right. The Conservative Political Action Conference has been underway, and I watched a little bit of it. It's almost like they're living in a parallel universe. They have no interest in the real world. You know, they've created this space for themselves where they're very comfortable, you know, surrounded by their peers. They don't really want to engage in reality. It says, as Republicans gathered in the free state of Florida after the first year of the Joe Biden presidency, speakers at the Conservative Action Political Conference hammered a message of an all-out fight for American culture, saying conservatives must take our country back from the radical left, which wants nothing less than to shut down their free speech and destroy their way of life. Of course, none of that is true. It's just racism. What they're basically saying is they don't want brown and black people to overwhelm the white person. That's basically what they're saying. Racism underlines everything. Everything I read that they talk about in this way is actually another way of talking about racial segregation. It says everything from pandemic restrictions to school lessons on race are all part of a Marxist agenda designed to lock people in their homes and cancel their ideas. I mean, it's so funny, you know, this truck convoy from Canada is now in Washington, and they're protesting vaccine mandates, and there aren't any vaccine mandates or mask mandates anymore. It's like it's done now, and yet they're only just got their protest together. The Republican leaders, including Ron DeSantis and Florida Senators Marco Rubio and Rick Scott, told the cheering crowd in the hotel ballroom over the last 3 days that it says the messaging at CPAC largely echoed many of the red meat issues championed by former President Trump, who during his speech on Saturday evening harped on the contrast between his administration and Biden's. He said Joe Biden has turned calm into chaos. Oh my God, calm. Trump's presidency, calm. There was a scandal every single day. Competence into incompetence. Hello? There was incompetence every single day. Stability into anarchy. Hello? He gassed his own people walking through Lafayette Park. Stability into anarchy, security into catastrophe, said Trump. The globalists, socialists, Marxists, and communists who are attacking our civilization have no idea of the sleeping giant they have awoken. I'm thrilled to report that our incredible movement is strong and growing stronger every single day. Many other speakers earlier in the conference also questioned the existence of transgender people, saying gender confusion is part of the broader woke culture to shut down the basic idea that there is only two sexes and pronouns cannot be chosen. They're saying this stuff out loud. I mean, they're not even making a secret of it. Claiming that transgenderism isn't real. It's like saying the earth is flat. The hotspots for this culture war exist online, in classrooms, and even where rockets are exploding on the actual battlefield of Ukraine. Several speakers said the US allowed the Russian invasion because Biden has been co-opted by a radical environmental agenda that's made America dependent on Russian oil. Again, none of this is true. None of it. Not even a shred of it is true. Not even an ounce of it is true. Or even a speck of it is true. And yet an entire movement is being built on this garbage. And still Joe Biden wants to do bipartisan work. He must be crazy. Let them just go and hang themselves. That's what he should do. Let them go hang themselves. Let them go create this. Because what they're doing is that everything they're saying is not going to be true. It's not going to come true. It doesn't have any bearing in reality. It's just rhetoric. It's just propaganda. So what you end up with is them... Because what's going to happen, just to digress from myself for a second, is that red states are going to find that they don't have the services. They're going to see pavements and sidewalks and roads with holes in them. They're not going to get the investment. They're not going to see any improvement or upgrading or change, positive change in their own cities. And yet, blue states will. And there will come a time when conservative voters are going to be like, well, we're saying all this stuff out loud, but actually, like, nothing's really happening here. Like, nothing has really changed for us. Like, the economy is still terrible. Why are these other states doing so well? I mean, that's my biggest fear for these people. I want everybody to have a decent life. But if you're going to go down a rabbit hole like this, you're going to end up with... You're just going to end up in a place that is doing you a disservice with leaders that don't care for you. I can't vote, sadly, in this country. You know, as an immigrant, I'm not able to vote. I mean, if I lived in New York, there are some things they're now allowing immigrants to do, like vote in like local elections for the mayor and stuff like that. But no, I would need to be a citizen before I can vote. I mean, there are campaigns to try and get people like me, permanent residents, to be able to vote. But I personally feel, you know, hi Steve, by the way, I'm kind of happy. I don't really feel the needs to vote, but I do feel the needs to campaign, you know, to kind of share the truth in an entirely non-partisan way. Oh, I would love to become a citizen of this country. Yeah, absolutely. My brother's done it. I would love to do it. My son is a citizen. You know, I'd absolutely love to be an American citizen. I love America. I love it. I think it's, you know... And I don't say phrases like it's the greatest country in the world, because that's simply not true. You know, you look at the leaderboard on things like, you know, median wealth or education or health or any of these things, and America is like right down at the bottom, like in the 45th or 37th place, of countries where it's, quality of life. Well, no, weirdly, that's not fair. Quality of life, it's actually pretty high, in my opinion. But statistically, it's not. Statistically, there's a million places you could live and have a much better quality of life. Invariably, they are places where the taxes are higher. You pay a little more tax, you have a much better quality of life. And that's what I believe in. I believe in we all pay in and we all benefit. I've been reading a lot recently about the idea of having a 10% flat tax. You ever looked into this? The idea that everybody pays 10%? Everybody, even the very wealthiest and the very poorest, everybody pays 10%. And they reckon that, and then you have no tax law. You don't have to do away with like thick binders full of tax law, and you can do this and you can do that and you can't do this and you can't. No, 10%. You just pay 10%. It would put accountants out of business. But it's not a bad idea, I mean, and the other thing is that if you have a 10% flat tax, anybody that earns under a certain amount, like, I don't know, $25,000 or $30,000 or something, shouldn't pay any tax, right? So you basically exempt the very poorest from paying any tax. And then over a certain amount, everybody pays 10%. I think it's a very good idea. I mean, there has been, and I also, believe in, there's a system you might be aware of called UBI, which stands for Universal Basic Income. And I also believe in that. So I would have a 10% flat tax, and I would do a UBI, which is also being trialed in California here. In certain areas. And UBI basically means that you get paid to live. So you don't have to have a job. Unless you want one, you can have a job as well. But you are basically paid a flat rate by the government to live. It's not a huge amount. It's like, it could be like $400 a week or something like that. But that's what you're given to live. And the idea behind universal basic income is that you take that $400 and you put it back into the economy when you spend. And it keeps the economy moving. And it's a very clever way of maintaining, inflation and all of these things, like keeping things in a good place and also preventing poverty. But you should look it up. I mean, I think that genuinely there is an argument for a universal basic income and a flat rate tax. So that's the Bradenton Herald. Let's move on. What do we have here? The St. Lucie News. Same pandemic, worlds apart is the headline. It says, where do you keep your COVID vaccination card? If you keep it on you for quick access to a restaurant or a show, or if you've slipped it into a plastic sleeve to safeguard it from spills, chances are you're from New York. If your pristine card is tucked away in a folder with your passport, birth certificate, and other important but seldom used papers, it's much more likely you live in Florida. It says, gone are the days when flip-flops versus wool socks and parkas versus swimsuits distinguished each end of Interstate 95 a person calls home. These days, it's evident by the location and condition by a 4x3 piece of card stock with stickers and dates notated. And that's not all. Faced with the same pandemic, with remarkably similar but no less tragic death tolls, Florida, as of February 21st, at 68,995, New York at 66,466, out of a total population of 21.7 million in Florida and 20 million in New York. The two states have chosen strikingly different paths forward. It says our contrasting COVID cultures impact everything, from whether we don masks to how even if we dine out. Interesting. I mean, there's no right way, is there? Fundamentally, there's no right way. because this was a virus that nobody really knew what it was and what it did and how it was going to evolve. So you kind of throw everything at it at the beginning. You like don't touch your Amazon packages for fear of that they're going to give you COVID. My sister has COVID, by the way, and she's now given her cat COVID. The poor little cat. I've been looking at it on FaceTime. The cat's called Miso, which is a weird name. It's like they're going to eventually turn it into soup. But the cat has COVID, and so the cat is like walking around being like crazy and like crashing into things and doing little miniature sneezes. Choo! Like that. Very cute. It turns out cats can get COVID. And I knew this already because there was famously the story about the tiger in the zoo. Was it in Atlanta? I think it might have been Atlanta Zoo, where the tiger got COVID. You know? Because he wasn't wearing a mask. So then they mandated masks for tigers in Atlanta. And that's obviously prevented other tigers from getting it. It was the Bronx Zoo. Okay, it was the Bronx. Yeah, my photographic memory let me down that time. But I got, I was kind of more East Coast, so I was close, And that was like nearly a year ago, that story, right? That was nearly a year ago. So tigers have been getting COVID for a while, so little Miso, it's no wonder little Miso got one. This chair is jokes. They said it had wheels, they barely turn. Do you remember when Donald Trump tried to take credit for the invention of the wheel? He was listing things that had been invented in America that were like great American things, and he couldn't think of anything because he's an idiot, so he just basically said the wheel. Do you remember that? Donald Trump tried to say that America should take credit for the invention of the wheel. Nobody questioned it at the time because they were just in this tornado of insanity. Kathleen has joined us. Hello, Kathleen. Welcome to Backchannel. If it's your first time, I'm thrilled. I think it is. You're in California. Welcome. Great to see you. Dominic is with us as well. Steve and Kim and Linda. Wonderful. Thank you. Returning for battle is the headline. Some Ukrainians are coming back to help the nation fight the Russian invasion. And a devastating photograph, I think it was from a video clip of a father hugging his daughter on Sunday as the family reunites at the Mayadka border crossing in Poland after fleeing the conflict in Ukraine. Yeah. Steve says yes. Well done, Steve. You've got that whole yes and no thing down pat. And US and Russia entwined in space programs and companies. This is fascinating to me because, of course, whilst on the ground we've got this warfare, in the outer reaches of space, there is this integration of nations. It says the space age was born at the height of the Cold War, when the United States and Soviet Union were fierce competitors trying to establish leadership over the new frontier. But beginning with the first Apollo-Soyuz mission in 1975 that saw American and Russian capsules dock in Earth orbit, the two countries began to collaborate on space projects, culminating with the International Space Station. Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent sanctions imposed by the United States and Europe now threaten our space collaborations with Russia. But the two countries' space programs are entwined in ways that won't be easily unwound. There's astronauts up there, and cosmonauts, as they're called in America. You know, these in Russia, these people are up there together, sharing the International Space Station, queuing for the bathroom. I mean, I don't for a second think that the people up in the space station are suddenly going to become enemies because their countries are at war. And I'll tell you why. When they look out the window, they beam us back the occasional photograph of how beautiful the planet looks from that distance in the ISS. There is no way you could be at that altitude looking back at your planet and make any sense of war. Because you don't see borders. You don't see land crossings or tolls, you know? All you see is this huge, beautiful blue ocean planet with its atmosphere and weather systems and light pollution. And you see it, and you just think the whole thing is beautiful. And you think of the whole thing as one place, as one race, as humanity living on this planet. The idea that humans are shooting humans right now with guns, like arm-to-arm combat. The fact that we are having arm-to-arm combat right now, boots on the ground, Russia against Ukraine, Ukraine not fighting back, just defending themselves, because that's the rules of NATO. It's just beggars belief. So there is no way that a cosmonaut and an astronaut up in the ISS looking down are going to suddenly fall out or start fighting. That if anything, they're going to look back at this planet and they're going to be like, what are they doing down there? They must be crazy. Look how beautiful this solar system is. And maybe it would be helpful for all of us to take a leaf out of the book of the cosmonaut and the astronaut and just change our perspective on this planet. Instead of looking at it head on and seeing all of these conflicts, to go from above and look down and to try and, recognize the difference between what is important and what isn't. And what's important is climate change. That's the thing you'll see when you're up there. You'll see all these extreme weather events from up there. And you'll be like, that's the most important thing. That's what we can see from space. Let's deal with that first. But fighting over territory because you want to restore the Soviet Union? Really? These days? FIFA and UEFA have suspended Russian clubs and teams from Soccer World Cup and all competitions. That's just broken right now, which means that, Russia is being increasingly isolated on the world stage because of this, and if Putin likes football, that would be an interesting thing, wouldn't it? If FIFA expelling them was the thing that ended the war. Because Putin's like, I really, they've got to have some teams to play with. Wouldn't that be great? That was the one thing that solved all of this. And then the other thing I read was that FIFA are a particularly corrupt organization in the first place. So, I guess it's the blind leading the blind. But I was reading that Roman Abramovich, who's formerly the Chelsea owner, I think he just gave it up a couple of days ago, is now, because he's a friend of Putin, he's a Russian oligarch who was living in London, who can't live in London anymore because he can't get back into the country. Apparently, he's going to try and, do his best to broker peace. Abramovich. I used to see Abramovich around because I lived in the area where he was. I used to see him all the time. It's really interesting, isn't it? Times like this that a football club owner, Chelsea Football Club, a soccer team in England, probably the most famous soccer team in England, alongside Arsenal and Manchester United and whatever else, feels compelled to want to step in and do what he can. You have to understand something about England. England doesn't have any money, right? As a country, it's pretty much bankrupt. And historically, all of the money that used to be in England that belongs to the gentry has all now been spent on fixing roofs of country house estates. They just don't have any money now. They have property and land, but they don't have any readies. So they have to raise money, or they have to open the gardens up to raise money to fix the roof. There's just no wealth. So the wealth that is in England comes from three places. Carla, I'm sure you can agree. We have a lot of Saudi money, right? Saudi Arabia has a lot of money in England. So Saudi Arabia has bought like the Shard, the most famous tower in London. You know, it's the tallest tower in Europe. It's a shard of glass designed by an Italian architect. Beautiful it is. Houses the Al Jazeera news network. I used to work in there. That place is owned now. In fact, that place wasn't going to be built because obviously the British money ran out. So a Saudi consortium bought it. So there's a lot of Middle Eastern money in England, in London especially. And then of course there's Chinese money. A lot of the Chinese have invested in huge projects and construction projects. They have plenty of money. And then finally, the Russians. The Russians love London for the same reason as the Chinese and the Middle Easterns, is because London is very much a tax haven. It's a tax haven, like Monaco or Switzerland. You know, London is considered to be a safe bet for your tax. You know, minimal tax payment in comparison to some other places. And so we have a lot of Russians with their big bucks, and they buy football clubs and they buy, you know, institutions. And it's a very interesting attitude that England has taken on. It's like, well, we don't have any money left because we've spent it fixing the roof. You know? It's very rare that you'll meet like very wealthy Brits these days. Most Brits are poor. They're working for organizations that are owned by foreign investors. And if you look at the debt clock of the United Kingdom, you'll see that, you know, the debts are massive, massive debts. And so I'm very, you know, coming from London, I'm very used to being around Chinese and Russians and Middle Easterns. That is the city now. And in certain pockets, I can tell you where they are. You want to meet Chinese people, go to Bond Street and see people shopping on Bond Street. The only people going into designer stores and spending thousands on designer stuff are Chinese people. You want to see Middle Easterns, go to the Royal Parks, go to Kensington Gardens. You know, yeah, go to the Royal Parks. That's where you'll find Middle Easterns. Men walking ahead, women in burqas walking 7 paces behind. The hotels of Park Lane have all been renamed now. They've now all got Saudi names as well as English names. You know, in fact, some of the hotels have sold off some of their hotel rooms to Middle Eastern organizations now. So regular people can rent a hotel room for the night, but also wealthy Middle Easterns own hotel rooms. They've converted whole swathes of these huge Park Lane hotels into apartments now, so that these people can say, I rent an apartment or I own an apartment at a hotel. They had to. And finally, if you want to meet Russians, well, you go into Chelsea, you know, near the football club. And it's where the Russians are now. And I lived amongst this for years, and it's normal to me. It's completely normal. I don't see it as being exceptional or being spectacular or being annoying. It's just normal. We have a huge Polish community. You know, go to West London, go to Shepherd's Bush or Ealing and meet the Poles. Or Acton. These lovely little pockets. That's right. Well, Cricklewood was Irish, famously, you know, like Brondesbury, places like this. These are all little areas of London. And I can identify down to the square mile where certain types of people gravitated towards and where these places, they didn't become ghettoized. It was integrated, but this is where people went. Southeast Asians are in South London. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, where did all the Londoners go? And the answer is simple. Essex. They went to Essex. And they went to East London and North East London. They went to Finsbury Park, or they went out to Shoreditch, or they went to, you know, the Isle of Dogs. All little places around the city. And being from there, I can identify where people have moved to and gravitated towards. And different communities have settled. And it's amazing because these places are all like within walking distance of each other. I mean, it would be a long walk for some of them, but I'm saying it's like, compared to America, it's so small. And it's wonderful. But my worry is that when you're at peace, it's fine. But when you're at war, what happens? What happens to Chelsea Football Club now that Roman Abramovich has given it up because, they needed his money. He was very good at his job. He was a very good owner of Chelsea Football Club. No one complained about him. So just get the feeling, really, that we underestimate quite how globalized we are now and how very much integrated we are in terms of multiple nations and nationalities, and it's all embedded, and we need each other. And to say that America could survive without China would be foolish. China, if you want goods, cheap, good stuff, they make the great stuff. Your iPhone is made in China. Foxconn, it's designed in California, but it's made in China. And then it gets shipped to Ireland. It's so crazy. Apple have a headquarters in Ireland. Why? It's tax efficient. Tax efficient. So often if you phone Apple tech support and you're in England, you get an Irish person on the phone. Norwegian Airlines had its base in Ireland, and you had an Irish crew on Norwegian planes. This is what a global society looks like, and feels like, and sounds like. It is not this America first isolationist attitude. That's not how we live anymore. It might be in middle America, in small towns where you're just, you don't see a black or a brown person or a foreign national. You just don't meet people like that. Everyone's looks and sounds the same. But across the wider world, it's just not like that. Go to Dubai. Dubai is a hub. Dubai International Airport, there's 3 airports there now, but, that is a hub for international travel. You can go anywhere from Dubai as a waypoint. London Heathrow is similar. These are stop-offs, so to give you access to the entire world. And what goes with that is, England is very aware that Heathrow brings in foreign nationals. So because they don't want to fly, all day and all night, people stop and they come into the country and they do business in the country. We need it. America needs China. It really needs China. And to criticize China and to try and, make China out to be the enemy when it comes to global trade is foolish. When it comes to human rights atrocities, I'm totally with you. Want to talk about human rights atrocities? China's your man. President Xi Jinping, two-faced, not a good person. But that doesn't prevent us doing business with 1 billion people. There's 1 billion humans who are not bad people, just because the leadership is. What is a country? A country is not its leader. A country is its people, its inhabitants, its workers. That's what makes a country. And what makes America great is its people, not its architecture or its faith, or it's people, individuals. And when I say I love America, I love it because of the people that I meet. Obviously, I love the climate here in California. It's a big part of it. But, it's all connected. Rossi has joined us. Hello, Rossi. Welcome to Backchannel. Great to see you. Kathleen, Dominic, Steve, Kim, Linda, Z, Junior, Alan, Patricia, Jack and Stacy. Thank you for being the Monday morning posse here on Backchannel. We're going to listen to the US News Update now. It's a 2-minute podcast that I bring you every day. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts. Find out what's happening across the United States of America. Here it is. It's Monday, February 28. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US News Update. I'm Anthony Davis. The Biden administration will ask Congress for $6.4 billion in economic and military aid to help Ukraine as it fights the Russian invasion, Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said on Sunday. Schumer said the request will be added to a spending bill expected to reach the Senate floor next week. The governors of a handful of U.S. states have ordered government-run liquor stores to stop selling Russian-made vodka and distilled spirits in solidarity with the Ukrainian people after Russia's invasion of the neighboring country. Utah Governor Spencer Cox became the latest over the weekend, instructing the state's Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control on Saturday to take off all Russian-produced and branded products from the shelves of its retail stores. Meanwhile, federal authorities are reinstalling fencing around the U.S. Capitol as Washington prepares for planned truck arrests inspired by demonstrations in Canada against COVID-19 pandemic-related restrictions, which currently are not in force. Authorities were taking the step to protect President Joe Biden's State of the Union speech scheduled for tomorrow and to prevent any disruption to the important work of Congress, said U.S. Capitol Police Chief Tom Manga. The fencing was previously installed after supporters of former President Trump rampaged through the Capitol on January 6, 2021, in a failed effort to block Congress from formally certifying his election loss to Joe Biden. It was removed last July. Your daily US News Update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel. There it is. That's the US News Update. It's a podcast. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts, and hopefully you'll subscribe. I'm Anthony Davis. This is The Anthony Davis Show. I'm here every morning, Monday to Friday, between 9 and 11 Pacific. That's 12 and 2 Eastern. After me is your pal Hal. We'll check out what's happening throughout the rest of the day on Backchannel shortly as well. We're looking through the morning papers. You're joining us. Dismiss is with us. Janet and Rossi, Kathleen, Dominic, welcome. Thank you for joining the show this morning. Let's see what else we have for you. Oh, yes, that's right. We're going to look through a few more newspapers. Where did we get to? I think we got to... let's do the Miami Herald next. The Miami Herald this morning leads with... Putin puts nuclear forces on high alert. Yes, Vladimir Putin dramatically escalated the east-west tensions by ordering Russian nuclear forces put on high alert Sunday, while Ukraine's embattled leader agreed to talks with Moscow as Putin's troops and tanks drove deeper into the country, closing in around the capital. Citing aggressive statements by NATO and tough financial sanctions, Putin issued a directive to increase the readiness of Russia's nuclear weapons, raising fears that the invasion of Ukraine could lead to nuclear war, whether by design or mistake. Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? That you know, the moment that nuclear weapons are involved, they are not perfect, are they? No weapon or missile is perfect. So if you end up accidentally nuking a whole enclave of Ukraine, there's no going back from that, is there? That would spark a world war. A bill could prohibit abortions in many birth defect cases. On the front of the Miami Herald this morning, it says that by the squat rental house at the back of a 4-acre plot past the horse paddock, but not quite to the barn, a sapling grows. It's obscured by the toys, a toddler-sized plastic car, a stomp rocket, all types of miniature sports equipment. It's dwarfed by the American flag, weather-worn and a little too big for its place, but hung with pride by the door. The sapling, a sweet bay magnolia, has branches that look more like twigs. It's only ever sprouted one flower last spring. Nathaniel's tree. His parents, Danielle and Jason, planted it on November 1st, 2020, a day after their son's expected due date. To his parents, Nathaniel wasn't a pregnancy or a collection of cells. He wasn't a fetus. He was a child. They had named him, announced his coming arrival, bought him stuffed corduroy dinosaur similar to the stuffed fox they'd gotten for their eldest son. And then after 22 weeks and 5 days of a pregnancy, Danielle and Jason wanted more than anything. They made the decision to abort him. This year, Republican state leaders have proposed a bill that would ban almost all abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. They've proposed exceptions in cases in which the mother's health could be jeopardized or in cases involving a life-threatening medical condition for the child. So, many fetal abnormalities are not detected so early, which could lead to a mother giving birth to a child with serious medical issues. And that's really the point, isn't it? And what is even leading this? A survey in Florida was done recently, and it turned out that like 60% of the people didn't want to have these extreme abortion laws. It's only Ron DeSantis doing it because he knows that a good percentage of his conservative base are fundamentally behind him with this. I don't even think he believes in it necessarily. So that's the Miami Herald this morning. Let's move on a little bit now to the Austin American-Statesman for Texas. They lead with Putin orders nuclear forces put on high alert, Ukrainian delegation to meet with Russians. Protecting the pristine, a photograph of Lou Adams sitting on a bank at Roy's Creek Canyon's crystalline pool. The 17-foot deep pool is surrounded by boulders and cypress trees and catches water as it flows. The owner aims to conserve hill country ecosystem, is the headline. Lovely. And finally, Texas sees increase in demand for abortion pills. That's right, we found out the other day, was it like 50 or 60% of all abortions are done with a tablet rather than any kind of invasive procedure. And, they're looking, this is a study that is looking at the number of requests after a new law took effect in Texas. It says nearly 6 months after Texas adopted the most restrictive abortion law in the country. The number of such procedures performed after 6 weeks of pregnancy has plummeted, but demand for self-managed abortion care in the state has increased substantially, according to the study by the University of Texas. The study released on Friday looked at requests for abortion medication through Aid Access, a non-profit based in Austria that sends abortion medication through the mail. In the weeks and months after the implementation of Senate Bill 8, which prohibits abortion after a fetal heartbeat can be detected, usually around 6 weeks of pregnancy. There was a dramatic increase in requests made to the non-profit in the week after the law took effect on the 1st of September, and with a sustained increase over the next 3 months, and with the number of average daily requests more than doubling over that period. Interesting. I mean, I just feel like, again, these things are not done democratically, are they? These life-changing decisions made by these state governors. And yet their fans and supporters purport to be celebrating their freedom and their liberty, and yet they have an authoritarian dictator running their state who says, we're going to ban abortion after 6 weeks without asking anybody. How is that freedom? How is that liberty? That's just assuming everybody has the same views as you. And I said again, I don't think Greg Abbott in Texas, I don't think Ron DeSantis in Florida, I do not think these people believe in abortion at 6 weeks themselves. I don't think they do. I think that they think that that's what their people want without even asking them. Because the conservative echo chamber of Christian conservatism and evangelical Christianity and this whole movement now, and this, it's just an echo chamber. It's barely democratic. It's authoritarian in many ways. So, it's worth looking at together, this subject, isn't it? It's worth looking at. So that's the Austin American-Statesman this morning on this Monday, February 28th. Is it the last day of the month today? I think tomorrow is March. How did that even happen? How did tomorrow become March already? Already. Okay, the El Paso Times we're going to next. Staying in Texas, they lead with UT system approves $300 million endowment for free tuition programs. More Texas students might see college become more affordable after the University of Texas System Board of Regents approved a $300 million endowment on Thursday that will help support programs covering the full cost of tuition and fees at 7 UT system schools. Lovely. You know, money for education, that's a good thing. More electric vehicles in Texas is the headline. It says how federal charging station money could affect driving habits. Buzz Smith, such a great name. Buzz Smith may have never discovered the hill country charms of Kerrville if he wasn't driving an electric vehicle. He and his wife had ventured forth from their homes near Fort Worth for a road trip that was to take them well past the range of their Chevy Volt's battery power. Kerrville was not on their itinerary or even on their way, but an app on the smartphone showed it was the nearest place they could quickly get a recharge. And while they waited for a comparatively slow process to run its course, Smith and his wife, Bonnie, decided to spend a little time in the town near the headwaters of the Guadalupe River. We plugged in there, we took mountain bikes down from their racks and went down to the river, Smith said. They have a beautiful park right near downtown. We did some cycling there. We took the kayak because there was a river that ran through the town. How do they get all of this onto their little Chevy Bolt? Such a tiny... Oh, it's a Chevy Volt. That's why. Well, a Chevy Volt, takes gas. A Chevy Volt is is a plug-in hybrid. So this story is not quite true. Or they mean Bolt. A Chevy Bolt is a fully electric car, and a Chevy Volt is a plug-in hybrid that runs on gas. I mean, it's all in the detail, isn't it? You know? Hello to Kendra, Dismiss, Janet, Rossi, Kathleen, Dominic. I'm still with you. You're still with me. This is all we can ask for. If you want a message, go to backchannel.tv. If you're not sure how to, then you can do it there. Smith, who once worked in the oil and gas business, made the switch to electric vehicles almost a decade ago and later became a salesman for the Volt at a Chevrolet dealership. He said the anecdote about his experience in Kerrville could be an object lesson for how the $408 million in federal money to dramatically expand the number of electric vehicle charging stations will help rewire the way Texans view personal transportation. The money, part of the $1 trillion infrastructure bill that Congress passed this year, will flow into Texas over the next 5 years. The Texas Department of Transportation is in the early stages of developing a plan to submit for federal approval for how the money should be spent. And private companies are also exploring ways to compete for the right to build and install stations along the state's major transportation corridors. I just had a thought, Why does every gas station not have an electric charger at it? Why build a whole new thing? Why not just, encourage the gas companies through sanctions? Make rules. You want to have a gas station? You've got to have 3 electric charging high-speed chargers. Every gas station. Seems obvious to me. Every gas station. Why would that be so difficult? Why do we have to go to some... I've driven, and I've been looking for charge. I've literally driven into, the weirdest private parking lots. I've driven into, the back of Beyond where there's, a solitary charger. Why not just... I tell you where there is a very good place. I don't know if we've discussed this, Carla, but on the... I'm trying to remember the names of places in England. On the Fulham Road, almost at the junction with the Fulham Palace Road, there is an old Shell garage there, and they have converted that into a complete electric charging station. So it's all electric charging. And they've converted the gas station into an electric charging station. The whole gas station is electric, no gas. And it looks like a gas station. Haven't changed the design that much, apart from making it a little bit more attractive. It looks a little contemporary. But the whole thing is an electric charging station. Station is the magic word here. Gas station, charging station. Convert every gas station into electric. That's what I suggest. That's the answer to all of this. Because also psychologically, every time someone goes to get gas with their combustion engine car, they're going to see someone charging with an electric charger, and they're going to see how sexy the car looks, because it'll be a new design car, which invariably they look more futuristic than old combustion engine cars. And they'll be like, yeah, that's kind of cool. Because it only takes 20 minutes to charge now, to get a full charge. And you don't need to do a full charge. You could just do enough charge to get you home. And then charge at home. So you could charge for like 3 minutes. I could charge my electric car on the high-speed charger for 3 minutes at a commercial charging station, and that would give me, wherever I was, enough to get home, another 20 or 30 miles. Do you see my point? Maybe we need to get out the habit of thinking we need to do a full charge at a charging station. Just like buzz it up a bit. A bit like you do with gas. You don't always fill up with gas. Some people can't afford to fill up with gas. They'll say, I can only afford $10. Put $10 worth of gas in and wait till the next paycheck, and then put some more in. Anyway, the point is that I think gas stations really are the solution to electric charging. And I think that if a gas station wants to be able to have the license to sell gas in the United States, they also need to provide electricity. And with their huge profits, they need to pay for the infrastructure themselves. It's just an idea. Maybe it's already in the energy and climate bill, the climate and social care bill. Maybe it's already in there. I don't know. I haven't looked. Interesting, though. Okay. Where are we at now? Where are we at? Let us see. I think that's everything on the El Paso Times. Let's move to the San Antonio Express News now for Stacey specifically. Ukraine to meet with Russia is the headline. Oh man, I can't even look at this photograph on the front. It's too terrifying. This is someone performing CPR on a child, injured in the shelling of a residential area. She didn't survive. So there's basically a photograph of a dead child on the front of the paper on the San Antonio Express News. I think that might be a step too far. It's a step too far. I don't think you should do that. I've whizzed past it. I think the San Antonio Express News lost my confidence today, so I'm going to drop them for the rest of this thing. And we'll move on to the Bellingham Herald for Washington. They lead with program takes litter control from police. Bellingham may address trash and litter downtown and homeless encampment removal by moving a code enforcement officer from the police department and shifting those duties to the public works department. So why the police were doing litter control in the first place, I have no idea. A photograph of another dead person on the front here of the Bellingham Herald. I mean, maybe it's just not such a big thing in the United States. Maybe people are used to seeing dead people all the time. In a dramatic escalation of East-West tensions over Russia's invasion of Ukraine, President Vladimir Putin ordered Russian nuclear forces put on high alert on Sunday in response to what he called aggressive statements by leading NATO powers. The directive to put Russia's nuclear weapons in an increased state of readiness for launch raised fears that the crisis could boil over into nuclear warfare. Yeah, Putin puts nuke forces on alert. Ukraine agrees to talks, is the headline. And a photograph of a tank on fire, some armored personnel vehicles like other smaller tanks burned out, and then what looks like a dead human in military fatigues lying on the ground with a rocket booster attached to his back, basically just dead. This is the reality of war, isn't it? This is basically what we're dealing with here. It's humans losing their lives because one unelected lunatic has basically decided that he wants to take his country back to the Soviet, era. Back in the USSR, as Billy Joel would say. Export fuel tax likely to end as state criticize a controversial proposal to include a tax on fuel exported out of Washington to neighboring states could be on its way out. The 6% tax Gallon proposal is part of a 16-year, almost $17 billion transportation package that's going to fund Democrats and fund transit and maintenance and other projects. This is now a proposed amendment from House Democrats to remove the tax from the plan. It would have brought in around $2 billion over the next 16 years to Washington. I mean, I think they're doing that because they're trying to reduce gas prices. You know? I don't know if that's going to work or not. And finally, on the front of the Bennington Herald here, it says, Whatcom removes racially restrictive land covenants. It says your home or property in Whatcom County may have restricted covenant that says only white people are allowed to own or occupy it. Excuse me while my head explodes. But a new law aims to help property owners fix that. A state law that went into effect last summer will identify any racially restrictive covenants on homes in Washington, including Whatcom County. Covenants and deed restrictions are being reviewed by teams from the University of Washington and Eastern Washington University, as directed by House Bill 1335, which took effect in July 2021. They will identify restrictions that include exclusionary language on the basis of race, ethnicity, religion, or other protected classes. The bill also sets up a process to notify the property owner and provide the owner with the options on how to remove the racist language. Oh, man. I mean, what world are we living in when this still is a thing? And, you know, the more I learn about it, the more I read about it, the more you realize how much of America was founded on racism. How embedded racism is into the fabric of American culture. Is it any wonder there's still so many problems? All these years after the civil rights movement, a man has to be executed, you know, in Minneapolis for people to kind of really start to focus on this issue once again. Restrictive covenants were placed on homes and properties throughout Washington in the first half of the 20th century. The covenants included language that singled out people of specific races or ethnicities who were prohibited from owning or occupying the property. This is what Donald Trump's father did, you know, when he was renting apartment blocks in New York. You know about this story, don't you? Yeah, old Fred Trump, famous Fred Trump, who gave his son, you know, the money to build the business. This is where all of the Donald Trump racism history story comes from. It's to do with his father, who was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And they refused to rent their properties to people of color in the 1970s, 60s, and 70s, when they started this property empire. They had these, you know, these tenement buildings, and they would refuse to rent them to black or ethnic minority people. Well documented. And you have to ask yourself, you know, what chance did Donald Trump have as a person growing up with that influence to not turn out to be racist? His father was a racist. I was watching a video of Trump in the Oval Office the other day from a couple of years ago, and there's a photograph of Trump Sr. right behind him in a frame. Fred Trump, he idolized his father, who arguably never gave him the love that he craved, and hence why he behaves the way that he does. But famously, the Trump family were anti-black in their property empire. Famously. The United States Supreme Court ruled in 1948 that racially restrictive covenants could not be enforced. In 1968, the Federal Fair Housing Act made it illegal to have covenants that discriminated on the basis of race, color, religion, or nationality. Washington state passed a companion law in 1969 making racially restrictive covenants void. But University of Washington professor of history James N. Gregory said the restrictions are a shadow over the city map, whether it's Bellingham, Seattle, or elsewhere. Gregory, who is a co-founder of the Seattle Civil Rights and Labor History Project, said these racist covenants were a powerful legal mechanism of segregation across the country. The racially restrictive covenants became popular in the 1920s through the 1940s, so neighborhoods that were created during that time are the most likely to have just white people living in them. And so now, of course, because of that, that early racism, we have all these problems there with boundary lines and being drawn and redrawn and gerrymandering. It's all connected. And I say, the country is founded on racism. It all goes back to this. Every time, no matter what you're arguing about, looking at, whether it be in Congress or whether it be in the CPAC conference or whether it be in war, it all goes back to racism of some kind. And then in other countries, it goes back to faith. And invariably, race and faith go hand in hand. And then we look at the abortion story we've been discussing. That goes back to faith. And the crazy thing is that most of these people don't even practice this faith, but they talk about it like they do. And it turns out that the people that are complaining about, pro-life attitudes are the ones who also need abortions. You can't have it all ways. Just have a liberal attitude to living and you won't have conflict in this way. The Gazette this morning leads with eager for emergence. Visitors to the home brew competition moved from booth to booth during the annual Flannel Fest in Janesville on Saturday. Thank goodness for something just light and trivial and, anything. But give me a booze fest any day. I don't even drink. Metrocom to bring fiber optic internet here. It says Indiana firm says it can provide gigabit speed. Do you know, it's so weird. I was actually looking at this morning. I've decided that I'm going to change my internet service provider because I don't even think that I have quite good internet here. It's just still not good enough. And if I'm doing these types of live streams, it needs to be much better. And so I think I'm going to have to pay the extra and switch to fiber. Long time coming. Oof, something happened with my neck just then. I'm not in a good way. I've been using my neck too much. I really shouldn't look around that often. Just keep looking straight on. It's much better for you. Okay, that's the Gazette. Did I do the Wisconsin Reporter? I can't remember. No, I didn't. From Jamaica to northern Wisconsin, a photograph of Newton Marshall taking a team of sled dogs on a training run at his home near Lily Marshall, who is a native of Jamaica, started racing dog sleds in 2005. Do you know that's one of the best things I've ever done? Is dog sledding in the Arctic Circle at night with nothing but a head torch with a convoy through a glacier. That's one of the craziest things I've ever done. Dog sledding, nighttime, northern Norway, Arctic Circle, freezing. Huskies. Pitch black. Trying to dodge trees. I have photos and video of it. One of the greatest things I've ever done. There are these things that, if you think about them, they would terrify you. If you find yourself having to do them, you end up having a really good time. It's a little bit like the party you don't want to go to. I don't want to go to a party. I'm done. I'm tired. I just want to come to the party. Oh, okay. Get to the party. Have a great time. It's the greatest feeling in the world when you finally succumb to doing something you're really not in the mood for and you have a really great time. I mean, that you could argue that feeling is one of the great feelings in life. Or leaving a dinner where you've had the best conversations and you just get home and you're like, that just felt amazing. I felt so engaged with other humans. I'm convinced of it. It's like sex or it's like friendship. Any of these things that integrate us, where we connect with our fellow man or woman. It's a wonderful thing. We're supposed to do this. We're not supposed to sit on our own in our apartments using the internet. That's not what humanity is. We're supposed to be eating together and laughing together and talking and lovemaking. That's what we're supposed to be doing as a race. Not fighting wars, shooting bullets and sitting at home alone, thinking that because we've got high-speed internet, it makes up for everything. And yet here we are, weathering a pandemic, feeling helpless about a war that's like 4,000 miles away. This is the reality, isn't it? The modern reality is that, we're fighting the wrong war. We should be fighting the climate change war, not the, territory war. We should be, grappling with our planet rather than like arm-to-arm, hand-to-hand combat with troops. It's, this is important. This is essential. This is humanity. This is what we have to do. We have to prioritize how we live. And I think we've forgotten. And I think because the internet is a window on the world, it gives us a sense that we are engaging, but we're not really engaging. I love a Zoom call as the next person, but I also am conscious of the fact that, we're missing out on an awful lot, on intimacy or on touch or on connection, language, all of these things. Jenny is with us, Doctor is with us, Kendra, Dismiss, Janet, Rossi, Kathleen, Dominic, Steve, Kim, Linda, Z, Junior, Alan, Patricia, Jack and Stacey. Thank you, all of you, for hanging out here on Backchannel as we spend a bit of time together. Nice to know that you are who you are and where you are. Also, how the neighborhood inequality shaped the COVID-19 pandemic in Wisconsin. It says it's no surprise where a person lives matters for their well-being. Decades of research has found affluent neighborhoods, for example, collate with better health outcomes for those who live there. But people don't simply stay in their neighborhoods. They travel to work, to shop, and to visit family. And that mobility, who is going to and from a neighborhood, also appears to matter for a person's well-being, according to a growing body of research. A new study reveals how neighborhood mobility might have helped shape the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic in Wisconsin and two cities, San Francisco and Seattle. Researchers used COVID infection data for 2,000 census tracts within 3 locations and compared it with a data set of 45 million de-identified cell phone records, to show where people traveled. The analysis looked at infection data prior to vaccines being available. It says we know where people in any given neighborhood are going, and we know the neighborhood that are coming to visit the neighborhoods that are coming to visit their neighborhoods. This is very interesting. This is very interesting, isn't it? So they're using our data. I knew that shopping centers did this. Are you aware of this? If you go into a mall, they're often using your phone GPS data to count how many people are traveling through the mall, where you're going, and they don't need your permission to do this. There's probably a little sign up on the wall that says they're doing it. And it's, if you don't fancy it, then you have to opt out. That's how they do these things. They take anonymous GPS data and they can follow footfall around shopping malls. Just to see how you shop and what you're looking at first and which shops you're drawn to and which shops you ignore. It's very interesting. They can learn your shopping habits. The software will learn your shopping habits, and so they can provide a better product and service and ultimately just sell more stuff. But this is a thing that's been going on for years. So here it's being used in this analysis to work out which type of people are moving into neighborhoods and leaving neighborhoods due to COVID infection rates. It's fascinating. Anyway, that's the reporter. Let me move on. We talked a little bit about Ukraine and the Conservative Political Action Conference. It's a 4-day event that concluded in Orlando, Florida last night. And that, if was any indication, the conservative base of the party is much more interested in the upcoming congressional midterm elections in November and defeating Democrats than they are about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Some of the top Republican office holders in the party, like Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis, Texas Senator Ted Cruz, and Florida Senator Rick Scott, didn't mention Ukraine at all in their speeches. Donald Trump, who took to the stage on Saturday night, offered a quick condemnation of the invasion, but spent more time defending his interactions with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that led to his first impeachment. He was literally impeached for his only ever interaction with Volodymyr Zelensky. Literally impeached for it. Can you help find us dirt on Hunter Biden to hurt the Joe Biden? It was extortion. He extorted him. This is what Alexander Vindman blew the whistle on. And yet now he's standing up at a CPAC doing his best to kind of rewrite history. He called Russian President Vladimir a genius. He added that NATO nations and current US leadership were dumb. I find that anyone that uses the word dumb is probably dumb. Such a dumb word to use. It really exposes how dumb. If you have to use the word dumb, any word that ends in a B should not be used. Apart from thumb, obviously. One of Mr. Trump's more loyal supporters, Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, who's obviously currently being investigated for having relations with underage girls, he went further, questioning why the US should be footing the bill for Ukraine by imposing sanctions that could damage the American economy. Others, like Louisiana Senator John Kennedy, warned of evil people who run countries without mentioning Mr. Putin by name. Oh, man, I mean, these guys are just in their pockets, you know? And Florida Senator Marco Rubio was particularly careful in the Ukraine portion of his speech. He said, no matter where you stand on this Ukraine-Russia situation, what we should have done beforehand, what we should do now, the one thing I think everyone can agree upon is that the people of Ukraine are inspiring to the world. Wherever you stand on this Russia-Ukraine situation, seriously. Marco Rubio, you're a disgrace. That's the kind of delicate language you seldom hear at CPAC when the topic is Iran or China. The speakers who were the most direct in their condemnations of Russia, in fact, were the ones who were commentators or foreign policy experts, like former National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien or Mark Levin or Sebastian Gorka, not current aspiring politicians. Sebastian Gorka might be one of the worst people I've ever watched do his thing. He really is on another planet. You know, just these people are on another planet. They are so far right. They're like, it's not, the right is beautiful. Be on the right, be on the left, but the far right is so dangerous. It's responsible for all of the domestic terrorism here in the United States, of which there are tens of thousands of shootings and killings every month. And we ignore it. We just think, oh, that's just normal, part of society. It's a white person. But if it's a brown person or a Middle Eastern person or a black person, then, of course, you know, the country criticizes, condemns, and comes down on those people, even though the ratio is minimal compared to domestic terrorism by white American nationals. All of this suggests a very real divide within the Republican Party over how to handle Russia's Ukraine invasion. A straw poll of conference goers found only 3% viewed Russia as the greatest threat to America versus 30% seeing China that way, and 61% choosing Joe Biden's incompetence. That same poll showed 59% of attendees wanted Mr. Trump to be their party's nominee in 2024, far surpassing the runner-up Ron DeSantis. Well, of course Trump is going to be the candidate. Of course he is. There's no one else. The guy is a megastar. He's a superstar. The only thing that's going to stop him from being the candidate is if he gets sent to prison. Even if he's under investigation, he'll still run. I'm telling you. They don't care. They don't care about the rules. They don't care about shame. They don't care about, you know, morals or conscience, social conscience or legal conscience. They don't care about any of those things. If you have a view on this, and all views are welcome, then you can message via backchannel.tv. You can also follow us on YouTube, and if you have an Echo Show, wake it up, say the word say, and then your message. Final story here is about climate change. Many of the impacts of global warming are now simply irreversible, according to the UN's latest assessment. But the authors of a new report say there is still a brief window of time to avoid the very worst. Yes, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that humans and nature are being pushed beyond their abilities to adapt. Over 40% of the world's population are highly vulnerable to climate, the somber study finds. But there's hope. If the rise in temperatures is kept below 1.5 centigrade, it would reduce projected losses. Just 4 months on from COP26, where world leaders committed themselves to rapid action on climate change, this new study shows the scale of their task. I mean, I've said this a few times now. It's almost like we've got to the point of no return. Nothing is going to change anytime soon. It just isn't. They say our report clearly indicates that places where people live and work may cease to exist, that ecosystems and species that we've all grown up with and that are central to our cultures and inform our languages may disappear, according to Professor Deborah Roberts. So this really is a very key moment. She said our report points out very clearly this is the decade of action if we're going to turn things around. This report from the IPCC is the second of 3 reviews from the world's foremost body of climate researchers. Last August, the first installment highlighted the scale of the effect that humans were having on the climate system. This new report looks at the causes, the impacts, the solutions to climate change. It gives the clearest indication to date of how a warmer world is affecting all the living things on Earth. I mean, I don't know. I've been saying this for ages, and tragically, when you have a pandemic, you forget about what's important, which was climate change, right? Before we had to worry about the pandemic, we worried about climate change. Then the pandemic comes along. Now we don't think about the climate change so much. And then, of course, as the pandemic is coming to an end, there's a world war. So now, again, we focus less on climate change and we think more about the war. And the point is that there can't just be one hot button issue. There has to be a whole range of things that we should have the capacity to manage at one time. And the media is hugely to blame with this, Why is the media probably not covering this report today about climate change and the damage being irreversible? The media will do wall-to-wall Ukraine. And yet, like I said, if your perspective is from the International Space Station and you're looking down and you're seeing the planet basically on fire, it's not the fire coming from Russian weapons. It's the fire that is caused by climate change. That should be the top story. Never is. Never is. Every extreme weather story, the last sentence of the extreme weather story should say, this is climate change in action. Never does. Remind ourselves that it's always climate change. No matter what we see, it's climate change. It's Friday. It's Monday, by the way. It's the last day of February. Tomorrow is March, so maybe we could start March with a different attitude. I mean, I like to do that. Every month I'm like, oh, what should we do this month? How should we refresh? What should we rethink? What book shall I read? How shall I improve myself? What can I do to kind of make myself a better person than I was last week? It's a little bit like I was thinking about Black History Month. My daughter was talking to me about Harriet Tubman the other day. Literally just came out with it. I didn't say anything. My daughter is 6 years of age. She's like, we've been celebrating, what did she call them? Like the greatest black people or something, she said, in school. I was like, oh yeah, who have you been talking about? She said, Harriet Tubman. I was like, you know about her? Gave me the whole thing. She told me the whole story about Harriet Tubman. She's 6 years of age. They are studying it in school. They're doing Black History Month. And this is my point about month to month, starting a new month. Why should Black History end in February? Why can't we carry it on and call it Black History Year or Black History Decade or Black History Century? Why do we stop thinking about climate change when there's a war? Why do we stop thinking about the pandemic when there's climate change or when there's a war? Why is one more important than the other? When arguably climate change is more important than all of these things, because it doesn't matter where you're living on the planet, your life is going to become immeasurably more difficult. I think about this stuff all the time. So let's spend the last few minutes of the show talking about Georgia Ann Robinson. Born in 1879, died in 1961, one of the first black American women to be appointed as a police officer in the United States. A former governess, she was a suffragette who worked tirelessly to make the world a better place for women and people of color. During World War I, there was a shortage of men, and she was recruited to work as a police officer here in Los Angeles. Though she initially worked on a volunteer basis, 3 years later she was promoted to the rank of full-time officer. She retired after being hurt on the job, but continued her volunteer work in the community. The first female black police officer to work for the LAPD. Think about that for a second. Think about it. And the LAPD has been outed recently as being very racist. It just has. I'm always reading about officers shooting black people who are running for their lives. And yet, in 1916, Georgia Ann Hill Robinson became the first black female police officer to work for the LAPD. Months before 15% of the police force of the United States would begin enlisting to enter combat in the First World War, Robinson began her groundbreaking 12-year career at the LAPD. Her work there would lead to her civic work, and she would devote her life to serving the residents of Los Angeles by fighting against segregation for women's welfare. She was born in Louisiana, May 12, 1879. She never knew her parents and was raised by her older sister, and later grew up in a Roman Catholic convent. When she was 18, she moved to Kansas to work as a governess, and there she met and married Morgan Robinson. The family moved to Colorado, and then to LA with their daughter, Marion. And in Los Angeles, Robinson's desire to serve led her to get involved with various community organizations. And it was through her work with these groups that she was approached and convinced by an LAPD officer recruiter to join the force. So on the 25th of July, 1916, at the age of 37, she became a volunteer for the LAPD. 3 years later, she became the city's first black policewoman when she was hired as a jail matron. Later, she became involved in juvenile and homicide cases investigated by the department. And in her position as an investigator, she discovered the need for a women's shelter in Los Angeles, and consequently she would help establish the Sojourner Truth Home for destitute women and girls. Robinson's time with the LAPD would come to an abrupt end when, at the age of 49, she tried to break up an altercation between two drunken women in her jail. In the resulting fight, Robinson suffered a devastating head injury that left her permanently blind. She retired, living on disability, when in 1954, Ebony magazine asked about her injury in her police career. She said, "I have no regrets. I didn't need my eyes any longer. I had seen all there was to see." That's quite the attitude of when you might go blind, isn't it? I actually use that argument a little bit when people ask me why I went mostly vegan. And I said I'd eaten all of the cows that I ever wanted to eat. I drank all the dairy that I'd ever wanted to drink. Like it's enough already. Now, it's not quite comparable to losing your sight. I'm not trying to undermine that, but I'm just saying that I can see where she's coming from, And I think being born blind is, it's a conversation you can have, isn't it? Being born blind and never seeing anything versus losing your sight, having seen the trees and the flowers and the grass and knowing what those things look like, or the faces of your children, or, making those connections. One of the greatest things I've ever seen... Will's just joined us. Hello, Will. Sorry, Carla's just reminding me that there's an entire audience out there. Yeah, Will, thank you for joining the show. First time, Will, welcome from California. Jenny's with us, Dr. Kendry as well. Will says hello. Hello, Will. Welcome. Yeah, Carla, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but You know when they do like eye surgery and they give blind people vision for the first time? And sometimes it's as simple as a cataract surgery. You know, they do cataract surgery in the middle of a developing nation. They can do it in a hut, you know. It's a little incision, and then the cataract, which is basically a disc of diffusion, is just removed from the eye, and it gives instant sight, but I mean too bright, so they have to cover your eyes for a day or two. But people who have cataract are given instant sight. Like it's like a miracle operation, and the surgery is very cheap. They can do it for just like $50. It costs $50 to do cataract surgery in developing nations. You have it done in America, it probably costs tens of thousands of dollars. It's just, the system is designed to make money, but not elsewhere. But now that they're doing these surgeries where there's a transplant or some kind of implant or something, you know, they've done all sorts of implants. They've done the same with ears, you know, when they're giving people back their hearing for things like, what's it called? When you have a cochlear implant. And the cochlear implant's getting smaller now. It's a little implant in the back of the ear, and then you wear a little thing on your head, and it's connected with a magnet. And you give the power of hearing, the sense of hearing back to people who could never hear. Because it bypasses the cochlea. It's very, very clever. And they're doing it with sight now. My point is that, you know, I just think as humans, you know, we learn to adapt, don't we? And if we don't have sight, we learn to adapt. And if we don't have hearing, we learn to adapt. And they say that people who don't have sight have the greatest hearing, the best ears. They use their ears in a different way to the way we use our ears, because we are using multiple senses at once. And so it's just nice to know how adaptable we are. I was telling somebody yesterday that I don't have a gallbladder anymore. My gallbladder was extracted, and somehow my body worked out how to live without one, even though it's an essential organ. Storing bile to break down food in your stomach. Take it out, somehow the body just copes. We're amazing. Anyway, we're about to end, but I just want to finish on, you know, celebrating the life of Georgia Ann Hill Robinson as we think about Black History Month, which comes to a close today. I think maybe we should continue. There's no shortage of black people to celebrate, so maybe we'll just continue for March as well, you know? Oh, it's International Women's Day tomorrow, isn't it? That's right. So we could just do American women who also happen to be black, and then we can inadvertently continue Black History Month. Yeah, or Latinos, or any denomination is fine. You know, if you have any suggestions, you're welcome to throw them in. Listen, thank you for joining me. I'm Anthony Davis. I'll come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We'll do this all over again. 2 more hours of chat about the news and the world and the shape of things to come. Next, talking of the shape of things to come, is your pal Hal. He's your man from 11 o'clock here on Backchannel. Have a good day.